Hi, it's Jennifer. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of radiation dose so you can kind of get your bearings as you go into this. So we've got three kinds of dose. Pretend this is my chalkboard here. We've got absorbed dose, which is the energy absorbed per unit mass, and that energy has to be deposited by radiation. And the unit we use for this is gray, or milligray is usually more appropriate. Then we move on to equivalent dose. Equivalent dose is calculated for a specific organ, and it's the absorbed dose adjusted for the effectiveness of that type of radiation. And effectiveness means the effectiveness in harming that tissue. So to get from absorbed dose to equivalent dose, you multiply this absorbed dose, that energy per unit mass, by the radiation weighting factor, or W sub R. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Units we use for equivalent dose are millisieverts per that organ, or to the specific organ. And then we move on to effective dose, or whole body dose. This is usually what we hear about in news reports, or just when we talk about radiation in general. And it is the equivalent dose adjusted for the sensitivity of that organ to radiation. So we multiply the equivalent dose by the tissue weighting factor, W sub T. Same units used, millisieverts, but now we don't have to specify what organ it's for. We'll get into these tissue weighting factors in a minute too. So let's talk about limits. So the limits per year are divided out into occupational limits, so someone who's accepted this risk for pay as part of a job, or a limit for the public. So our equivalent dose here, the ones that are to the specific organs, we break out organs that are really sensitive to radiation, the lens of the eye, your skin, your hands and feet. The limits here are 20 to 50. You can read through all this. And of course, it's less to the public because they have not specifically accepted that risk as part of a job. And then our effective dose, our whole body dose, the limits for occupational exposure annually are 20 to 50. It's 20 averaged over years with no single year exceeding 50. There's special exemptions in time of emergency, things like that. And for the public, it's 1 millisievert per year. Okay, so let's talk about 1 millisievert per year. What is that? What does that mean? Well, the average natural background radiation in the U.S. is 2.6 millisieverts per year. So the additional radiation that you're getting from man-made uses of radiation, not including medical uses, that's totally different. You should be getting 1 millisievert is your limit. You're already getting 2.6 from just living in the U.S. annually. That kind of gives you an idea of how much that millisievert is. Okay, so while we're on units, let's talk about some other units you might see. So our SI units, the ones used most widely around the world by the ICRP, the International Council on Radiation Protection, are grays for absorbed dose, or milligrays, and sieverts for equivalent and effective dose. In the US, we still use these more old-fashioned ones. Sometimes we'll see rads and rems. You've got to knock off 2 zeros to convert back and forth there. You might also see these ones here. These are units for decays per second, or counts per second picked up on your radiation detector. These are becquerels, named for Henri Becquerel, famous scientist. 1 becquerel is 1 count per second on your detector. And then 1 Curie, named for Pierre Curie, not Marie Curie, is 3.7 times 10 to the 10th, or, gotta look, 37 billion counts per second. So that one's a big unit. Okay, so coming back to that first slide, when we were converting between absorbed dose to equivalent dose to effective dose, we said we had to use radiation weighting factors and tissue weighting factors. So these radiation weighting factors, this is how effective that type of radiation is at causing tissue damage. These are the ICRP's radiation weighting factors. So for X-ray, gamma ray, beta ray, it's 1. You just multiply by 1. For neutrons, it's bigger than 1 because they are more damaging than this type of radiation. So it's 5 to 20 depending on what the exact energy of that neutron is. Protons, it's also 5. And then alpha particles, fission fragments, heavy nuclei, big things that are going to cause a lot of damage to our DNA, the radiation weighting factor is 20. All right, and then to get from equivalent to effective dose to our whole body dose, how sensitive is this organ to radiation, and how much does it matter to our body as a whole? These tissue weighting factors, based on the 2007 guidance by the ICRP, You can see that your gonads, so ovaries and testicles, are 0.08. So they're like 8% of your total body. So they're pretty important. And that has to do because harm to those tissues can go through generations, right? That's going to be a teratogen throughout generations. Your bone marrow, your colon, your lungs, stomach, breast, and remainder tissues. Remainder is specifically spelled out in this ICRP document down here, publication 103. These are 12% or 0.12 each. This is because those organs are very sensitive to cancer and they regenerate a lot. So anything in your GI tract is making new cells very often. And when they're in this specific cell cycle, they're really sensitive to radiation. And if they get hit by radiation during that time, it can kill that cell and it'll slough off. And it's especially damaging to the human or the animal or whatever organism it is. And then you can see there's lower tissue weighting factors for the other organs. All right, so that's my quick overview. I'll put my sources down below in the description or the comments. Ask me if you have any questions. I hope that helped you kind of get your bearings.